All right, so I'm glad you're here today. Let's get started on our lesson today. You should find this fairly easy, the majority of it. So today, students will be able to solve quadratic equations. We're actually not going to be solving well, we kind of are. Okay, yeah, we are. We're solving quadratic equations, but we're using a certain method. We're going to take the square root of things, okay? And you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so quadratic function. Remember, that's anything with the x squared that makes a quadratic function. The quadratic parent function looks like this. Okay, it's y equals x squared. Parabola, that's the shape of a quadratic function. Okay? X-intercepts is where the line crosses the what? The x-axis. They're also known as solutions, roots, zeros, and factors. Okay? So, I want you to raise your hand, call me over, and tell me all the names of the x-intercepts. Quadratic formula. This is the quadratic formula. This is a foolproof way to always finding your x-intercept or your zeros. Okay? It always works. The discriminant is what's inside the square root. Standard form, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Vertex form, which it looks confusing, but you'll like it later. Y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. Completing the square, we'll get to that way later. All right, so let's look at your assignment for today. So we're looking at using square roots, okay? So if we were to take the square root of 9, which I'm going to show you to do that in your calculator. Go to your calculator. You type in second square root. It's that x squared button, okay? And then yours automatically has parentheses, which is good. You put 9, close parentheses. Hit enter. What does it tell you? 3. And that's true because 3 times 3 is 9, right? But what else will make 9? Negative 3 times negative 3. Would that make a positive 9? Yes, it does. So, whenever you're taking the square root of something, the square root of 9 is not only 3, but the square root of 9 is also negative 3. Okay, it's both. You usually don't write the negative 3 because what you've been using it for, you've never needed it. So whenever you write the answer to what the square root of 9 is, you write this plus or minus sign. So it's plus or minus 3. That means you get to choose it's plus or minus. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's move down. We're going to do some of these examples together. So we're going to find the square root of each of these. So the square root of 25 is what? Not just 5, but it's plus or minus 5. Okay? So the square root of 289 is what? Type it in, square root of 289. What is it? Plus or minus 17, right? Okay? So the square root of 625 is what? Square root of 625 is what? Plus or minus 25. Be sure to say plus or minus so you don't forget. Plus or minus 25. Okay, and then you can type this one in as well. So we need the square root of 4 over 9, right? So you hit second square root. 4 divided by 9. Gives you that, so you hit math, enter, enter. It's 2 over 3. But what's our actual answer? Plus or minus 2 over 3. Okay? So let's go do some examples on the back side of your paper. So we're going to look at number 1. This is where you're solving, okay? So if x squared equals 169, remember how we had our rule. If it's adding, you subtract. If it's subtracting, you add. If it's multiplying, you divide. And if it's dividing, you multiply, right? Well, if it's squaring, what are you going to do to replace that? Square root it. Okay? Those are opposites. So we have x squared, and we want to get x by itself, right? So how do we get rid of that squared? By square rooting. And what you do to one side, you do to the other, right? So that square root takes out that squared. So we have x equals. What is the square root of 169? Try again. What is it? Try again. It's not just 13. Plus or minus 13. Okay? Now we're going to go down to number 4. Yes. Plus stands for positive, and minus stands for negative. Okay, so let's do number 4. We have x squared equals negative 625. If it has x squared, how do we get rid of that squared? By square rooting. So square root. So that takes out that, so we have x equals, we need to find the square root of negative 625. What happens when you type that in? Square root of negative 625. Error, non-real answer. That's because you cannot take the square root of a negative number. You won't be doing that until Algebra 2. Because once you start doing that, that's when you're in the world of imaginary numbers. That's right. We have real numbers and we have imaginary numbers. It's really cool. Okay, so this one didn't work, right? So here's what you say. You either say non-real or you say imaginary. You're not going to get into this yet, but the square root of 625 is what? Negative, well, it's 25, right? So you would actually say 25i, but we're not in that yet. It's fun. Okay, so number 7. Number 7 is 36x squared equals 1. What do we need to do first to get x by itself? Not square it. There's something else. Divide it by what? Divide it by 36. Okay? So we have x squared equals what? 1 over 36. Now what do we need to do? Now we need to square root it. So this and this cancel out. So we have x equals, what is the square root of 1 over 36? What is it? Plus or minus 1 over 6. All right? I believe we have one more example that we're going to go over together. Number 10. Okay, so number 10. We need to get x by itself. So we're going to move it over to the other side first. So I'm going to add x squared. That cancels, so we have x squared equals 90. All right? Now we need to square root the x. Yeah, so square root. What's the square root of 90? Is 90 a perfect square? No. So remember this. Can 90 be divided by 2? With what? 45. Can 45 be divided by 2? What about 3? 3 and what? 3 and 15. Can 15 be divided by 2? 3? 3 and what? 3 and 5. And those are both prime. Remember when we did this? So we do our square root. What goes inside the square root? 2 times 3 times 3 times 5. Just these. Okay? And then what do we do from here? Circle your pairs. And you take them out, right? So what's still left inside? 2 times 5. Okay? What is 2 times 5? 10. So our answer over here, x equals what? Not 3 to the square root of 10, but what? What's it missing? Plus or minus. Very good. So x equals plus or minus 3 to the square root of 10. Okay? So you're going to do the rest of this worksheet on your own. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. Come to me to check over your answers, and good luck.